Hey everyone, it's Julie and welcome to my contribution to the series 28 Days of the Moon. This is a series that Maha created, Maha over at Maha's Treasure Box. And so thank you to her for inviting me to take part. And she also collaborated with Amber over at Lavender Moon. And this is such a wonderful collection of videos from different awesome tarot tubers. And I have a bit of catching up to do with videos, but from what I've seen so far, I've just learned so much as a newbie to moon practice. This is a book review for Lunar Abundance by Dr. Ezzie Spencer. I read this in ebook format, and this has been on my TBR list for a long while, ever since I first thought about a moon practice and found a book review on YouTube from Jessica Starr over at The Story Witch. She was talking about this book as a good one for beginners, and so I took note of it. So I'll be referring to some notes here, and I'm going to start off by just giving you a brief setup and overview of the book and the kind of information that you would find. The book starts off by giving you a little bit of background on the author. She talks about her own personal life and how she came about her own moon practice. And then, as you would expect, the book jumps into describing each phase of each of the 8 phases of the moon, which I won't get into in this video because other contributors to the series have already done so in previous videos. But you will find that kind of information in this book, and the kinds of suggested behaviors and feelings and practices that you could tune into during each of these phases. And what's interesting about this book is that the author discusses the phases as alternating states of yin and yang. So yin being the state of being and yang being the state of doing. So if you have, say, the new moon, that would be the state of yang in her book, the state of action and doing. And then the next phase after that, the crescent, is a state of yin. And it just keeps alternating throughout the 8 phases. The author does provide examples of how one might engage in states of yin and yang more effectively versus less effectively. So behaviors or actions that she encourages, and behaviors and actions that we might find ourselves engaging in that might not be so beneficial for us during these phases. The book also gives checklists and journal prompts and suggested activities for each moon phase. And then you also have a lot of anecdotal examples, little stories of different people and how they engaged in a particular moon phase. And then each chapter ends with a nice kind of call-out box that summarizes the main takeaway points of that chapter. Now on to some of the pros of this book from my perspective. One of them being, and this actually might be considered a con for a lot of other people, but for me it was a pro, and that is that there is no astrology in this book. And that was the selling point for me because Jessica specifically mentioned in her book review that there was no astrology in this book. Astrology is a challenge all on its own for me, something that I am a newbie at. I've dabbled in it. It's not easy. And so I thought it best not to have that added layer. So I appreciated that. Another thing that I liked was that this author writes this book from a very kind of non-woo perspective. She's a former lawyer, and certainly she still does speak in terms of spirituality, but it's from, it has this more universal reach, and so it doesn't feel like the information is tied to being a Wiccan, for example, or being a witch, because I am neither of those. I also love how the author really highlights the aspects of lunar abundance. For example, that, you know, there are always moon cycles ahead. There's an abundance of opportunity to work with the moon to help us manifest what we want. And just the moon practice in itself being something that brings abundance into our lives, right? The book goes on to mention that we don't have to give in to the idea that the moon makes us do anything, that it has control over us and possesses us, you know, to do things or have certain feelings, but rather that it's simply a natural timekeeper. It's a natural tracker that we can use to focus on a specific goal or intention, or even just on a broader scale to check back in with ourselves and to help us cultivate a more fulfilling life by doing that. So this was just generally an easy read, a well-organized book, and I love that throughout the book, the author reminds us that the descriptions of the moon phases and the information that she provides, you know, the feelings and the ways of engaging with each moon phase, it's not going to look the same for everyone. It's all relative. So what works for one person might not work for another, and that is perfectly okay. Now on to some of the aspects that I thought were missing from the book, or that I would have liked to have seen more. So one thing, while the book does provide various example anecdotes, you know, little stories about certain individuals and how they engaged or what they learned in each moon phase, I would have also liked an anecdote that focused on one person from, you know, phase 1 all the way to the last phase of the moon cycle. A story that focused on one person with their specific goal or intention, and just to follow that same person throughout each of the phases and to see how they handled each phase and how they evolved and grew or moved toward that particular intention or goal. So I think that would have been helpful. Another aspect that I thought was a little limiting is that this book is intended for women, which I think excludes a wider readership. The author does use phrases like, for example, you know, this lunar phase is intended for women who are constantly, I don't know, hustling to slow down, you know, language like that. And then also, you know, the anecdotes, the examples of the different people, all women, all hetero-cis women, really. Again, it limits your readership. Finally, just one small quibble, and I don't know if it's because I read this book on my Kindle app as opposed to a print copy, so it could be that the formatting is different, but I found there to be a lot of, or enough, plugs to her website to annoy me a little bit, distract me, especially in the first part of the book. just throughout the chapters, there would be these call outs interrupting me to point to her website. Hey, for free journal pages, go see my website. For a free lunar calendar, go to my website. And it's great that she's providing these free resources, but after so many of those interruptions, it started to feel like a gimmick. And I would have appreciated maybe her just providing all of that up front, saying, hey, before we get into the book, these are some free resources on my website that you might want to check out and download so that you can use them as you proceed through the book. And I think that would have been more effective. Overall, I found this book informative. I think this is a good book for someone who is a complete newbie to working with the moon. The information is accessible, easy to digest. It gives a good high-level view of moon practice and the different phases, as well as some good, journaling prompts and suggested activities and checklists that can help someone as they begin their moon practice. So yeah, overall, I did find this book useful. If you've already read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts, so please drop a comment below. And once again, thank you to Maha for giving me this opportunity, and I hope you all are well. Take care.